Welcome back, amazing, wonderful people. The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle, read by me, Tracy Lene. Like, share, and subscribe. This book is, I'm going to start with that question that I ended with yesterday. What is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? Identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful action. But we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it, so it is considered normal. This incessant mental noise prevents you from finding that realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. It also creates a false mind-made self that casts a shadow of fear and suffering. We will look at that in more detail later. The philosopher Descartes believed that he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." He had in fact given expression to the most basic error, to equate thinking with being and identity with thinking. The compulsive thinker, which means almost everyone, lives in a state of apparent separateness, in an insanely complex world of continuous problems and conflict, a world that reflects the ever-increasing fragmentation of the mind. Enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one, and therefore at peace. At one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as with your deepest self and the life unmanifested. At one with being, enlightenment is not only the end of suffering and of continuous conflict within and without, but also the end of the dreadful enslavement to increased thinking. What an incredible liberation this is. Identification with your mind creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that block all true relationships. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man and woman, between you and nature, between you and God. It is this screen of thought that creates the illusion of separateness, the illusion that there is you and a totally separate other. You then forget the essential fact that underneath the level of physical appearances and separate forms, you are one with all that is. By forget, I mean that you can no longer feel this oneness as a self-evident reality. You may believe it to be true, but you no longer know it to be true. A belief may be comforting only through your own experience. However, does it become liberating? Let me say that again. A belief may be comforting only through your own experience. However, does it become liberating? Thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there's nothing wrong with cells dividing and multiplying in the body. But when this process continues in disregard of the total organism, cells proliferate and we have a disease. What's wrong with this phone? It's really weird. Screen is weird. Okay. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. To put it more accurately, it is not so much that you use your mind wrongly. You usually don't use it at all. It uses you. This is the disease. You believe that you are your mind. This is the delusion, the instrument that has taken you over. It's like you say, well, I just can't stop eating chips. I just can't stop doing this destructive behavior. It's controlling me. It's controlling you because you're allowing it to, because the illusion, you think you are your mind. You are not your mind. This is the question. I don't quite agree. It is true that I do a lot of aimless thinking like most people, but I can still choose to use my mind to get in and accomplish things, and I do that all the time. That's the person asking him the question, and this is his answer. Just because you can solve a crossword puzzle or build an atom bomb doesn't mean that you use your mind. Just as dogs love to chew bones, the mind loves to get its teeth into problems. That's why it does crossword puzzles and builds atom bombs. You have no interest in either. Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? You mean, and this is the person, you mean stop thinking altogether? No, I can't, except maybe for a moment or two. Then the mind is using you. You are unconsciously identified with it, so you don't even know that you are its slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without knowing it, and so you take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. Let me go back and read that again. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe this entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond the thought. That thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. The next chapter, freeing yourself from your mind. What exactly do you mean by watching the thinker? That's the person asking the question. And he says, when someone goes to the doctor and says, I hear a voice in my head, he or she will most likely be sent to a psychiatrist. The fact is that in a very similar way, virtually everyone hears a voice or several voices in their head all the time. The involuntary thought process that you don't realize you have the power to stop. Continuous monologues or dialogues. You have probably come across mad people in the street incessantly, talking or muttering to themselves. Well, that's not too much different from what you and all other normal people do, except that you don't do it out loud. The voice comments, speculates, judges, compares, complains, likes, dislikes, and so on. The voice isn't necessarily relevant to the situation you find yourself in at the time. It may be reviving the recent or distant past or rehearsing and imagining the possible future situations. Here it often imagines things going wrong and negative outcomes. This is called worry. Sometimes this soundtrack is accompanied by visual images or mental movies. Even if the voice is relevant to the situation at hand, it will interpret it in terms of the past. This is because the voice belongs to your conditioned mind, which is the result of all your past history as well as the collective cultural mindset you inherited. So you see and judge the present through the eyes of the past and get a totally distorted view of it. It is not uncommon for the voice to be a person's own worst enemy. Many people live with a tormentor in their head that continuously attacks and punishes them and drains them of their vital energy. It is the cause of untold misery and unhappiness, as well as disease. The good news is that you can free yourself from your mind. This is the only true liberation. You can take the first step right now. Start listening to the voice in your head as often as you can. Pay particular attention to any repetitive thought patterns, those old gramophone records that have been playing in your head perhaps for many years. This is what I mean by watching the thinker, which is another way of saying listen to the voice in your head, be there as the witnessing presence. When you listen to that voice, listen to it impartially. That is to say, do not judge. Do not judge or condemn what you hear, for doing so would mean that the same voice has come in again through the back door. You'll soon realize there is a voice, and here I am listening to it, watching it. This I am realization, this sense of your own presence is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind. So when you listen to a thought, you are aware not only of the thought, but also of yourself as the witness of the thought. A new dimension of consciousness has come in. As you listen to the thought, you feel a conscious presence, your deeper self, behind or underneath the thought, as it were. The thought then loses its power over you and quickly subsides, because you are no longer energizing the mind through identification with it. This is the beginning of the end of involuntary and compulsive thinking. When a thought subsides, you experience a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind. At first, the gaps will be short, a few seconds perhaps, but gradually they will become longer. When these gaps occur, you feel a certain stillness or peace inside of you. This is the beginning of your natural state of felt oneness with being, which is usually obscured by the mind. With practice, the sense of stillness and peace will deepen. In fact, there is no end to its depth. You will also feel a subtle emanation of joy arising from deep within, the joy of being. It is not a trance-like state, not at all. There is no loss of consciousness here. The opposite is the case. If the price of peace were a lowering of your consciousness and the price of stillness a lack of vitality and alertness, then they would not be worth having. In this state of interconnectedness, you are much more alert, much more awake than in the mind-identified states. you are fully present. It also raises the vibrational frequency of the energy field that gives life to the physical body. As you go more deeply into this realm of no mind, as it is sometimes called in the East, you realize the state of pure consciousness. In that state, you feel your own presence with such intensity and such joy that all thinking, all emotions, your physical body, as well as the whole external world become relatively insignificant in comparison to it. And yet, this is not a selfish but a selfless state. It takes you beyond what you previously thought of as yourself. That presence is essentially you and at the same time inconceivably greater than you. What I'm trying to convey here may sound paradoxical or even contradictory, but there is no other way that I can express it. Instead of watching the thinker, you can also create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into the now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment. This is the deep, satisfying thing to do. In this way, you draw consciousness away from mind and activity and create a gap of no mind in which you are highly alert and aware but not thinking. This is the essence of meditation. In your everyday life, you can practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is only meant to an end and giving your fullest attention so that it becomes an end in and of itself. For example, every time you walk up and down the stairs in your house or place of work, pay close attention to every step, every movement, even your breathing. Be totally present. Or when you wash your hands, pay attention to all the sense perceptions associated with the activity, the sound and feel of the water, the movement of your hands, the scent of the soap, and so on. Or when you get into your car after you close the door, pause for a few seconds and observe the flow of your breath. Become aware of a silent but powerful sense of presence. There is one certain criterion by which you can measure your success in this practice, the degree of peace that you feel within. So the single most vital step on your journey towards enlightenment is this. Learn to disidentify from your mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of mind, the light of your consciousness grows stronger. One day you may catch yourself smiling at the voice in your head, as you would smile at the antics of a child. This means that you no longer take the content of your mind all that seriously, and your sense of self does not depend on it. And it's the next sub-chapter. Enlightenment, rising above thought. The question, isn't thinking essential in order to survive in this world? And his answer, your mind is an instrument, a tool. It is there to be used for a specific task, and when the task is completed, you lay it down. As it is, I would say about 80 to 90% of most people's thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but because of its dysfunctional and often negative nature, much of it is also harmful. Observe your mind and you will find this to be true. It causes a serious leakage of vital energy. This kind of compulsive thinking is actually an addiction. What characterizes an addiction? Quite simply this. You no longer feel that you have the choice to stop. It seems stronger than you. It also gives you a false sense of pleasure that invariably turns to pain. This is the question. Why should we be addicted to thinking? His answer. Because you identify with it, which means that you derive your sense of self from the content and activity of your mind, because you believe that you would cease to be you if you stop thinking. As you grow up, you form mental images of who you are, based on your personal and cultural conditioning. We may call this phantom self, the ego. We may call this phantom self the ego. It consists of mind activity and can only be kept going through constant thinking. The term ego means different things to different people, but when I use it here, it means false self, created by unconscious identification with the mind. To the ego, the present moment hardly exists. Only past and future are considered important. This total reversal of truth accounts for the fact that in the ego mode, the mind is so dysfunctional. It is always concerned with keeping the past alive because without it, who are you? It constantly projects itself into the future to ensure its continued survival and to seek some kind of release or fulfillment there. It says, one day when this or that or this or the other happens, I am going to be okay, happy, at peace. You have to literally say, I'm happy and I'm at peace right now, because one day never comes. One day is always never here, because it's always the day you're in. So one day doesn't exist. If you say right now, I am at peace, I am at joy, I am content, that's the moment you're in, and those things will find you. Even when the ego seems to be concerned with the present, it is not the present that it sees. It misperceives it completely because it looks at it through the eyes of the past. Or it reduces the present to a means to an end that always lies in the mind projected future. Observe your mind and you'll see that this is how it works. The present moment holds the key to liberation, but you cannot find the present moments so long as you are in your mind. This is the question. I don't want to lose my ability. Well, maybe it's a statement somebody else is saying to him. I don't want to lose my ability to analyze and discriminate. I wouldn't mind learning to think more clearly in a more focused way, but I don't want to lose my mind. The gift of thought is the most precious thing we have. Without it, we would just be another species of animal. This is him. The predominance of mind is no more than a stage in the evolution of consciousness. We need to go on to the next stage now as a matter of urgency. Otherwise, we will be destroyed by the mind, which has grown into a monster. I will talk about that more later in detail. Thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. That's really nice. Let's say that again. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. Enlightenment means rising above thought, not falling back to a level below thought, the level of an animal or a plant. In the enlightened state, you still use your thinking mind when needed, but in a much more focused and effective way than before. You use it mostly for practical purposes, but you are free of the involuntary internal dialogue, and there is inner stillness. When you do use your mind, and particularly when you create when a creative solution is needed, you oscillate every few minutes or so between thought and stillness, between mind and no mind. No mind is consciousness without thought. Only in that way is it possible to think creatively, because only in that way does thought have any real power. Thought alone, when it is no longer connected with the much vaster realm of consciousness, quickly becomes barren, insane, destructive. The mind is essentially a survival machine, attack and defense against other minds, gathering, storing, and analyzing information. This is what it is good at, but it is not at all creative. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from a place of inner stillness. I know that because I'm an artist and I'll just have an idea. I'm working now on some more affirmation cards. You know, I have my journal and I'm working on some more affirmation cards, and it's coming from a place where the words are just flowing out of me. It's time. It's almost like it taps me on the shoulder and says, Tracy, it's time. And I start typing or writing because I don't want it to go away. I want it to utilize me. And by utilizing me, I know it's not my mind because it's thoughts that I don't necessarily think. I want to keep doing that because I do believe him when he says that when you get out of your mind, that's when the real life begins. When you stop judging yourself and judging others and accept everything exactly as it is and recognize that life is ever changing and ever moving. So it's always beautiful. You may not see the beauty right away, but if you look in the thing that you're looking at, that beauty will pop right out at you. I was walking today and there was this really beautiful, intensely red, like my hair, flower, and the flower was looking at me, and I said, my God, we're connected. I felt the energy of the flower because the flower looked like my head. I of course didn't pick on people's flowers, and I didn't want to take my phone out because I was on a phoneless walk where I was just walking and enjoying nature, and I thought I will capture it with my consciousness. I didn't say my mind. I said I'm going to capture this with my consciousness and be conscious of the vibrant red, just like this, on the flower. It was beautiful. So, okay. Anywho, it has been 20 minutes, and I told you guys we're going to do 20 minutes because this book is intense, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I didn't feel to add anything, and one of the things that I'm doing, being conscious, is adding when it says to add and not when it's not. So you got to hear the actual book without my 2 cents today. Don't expect that all the time, though. Anywho, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I will be back tomorrow to read you some more. You have a good night. Bye.